Hey, what's going on everybody? This is robwillis.info here, and in this video I'm actually going to cover something that I've touched on in the past, and that's updating the firmwares on a Dell PowerEdge R610 server. So before I jump into this one, I just want to say kind of real quickly that, I never expected people to really kind of subscribe to this channel and really enjoy the content or get into it. And over the past year, I've definitely been a lot less active. But it's kind of surprising to me that when I do publish a video, I'll get people, saying, thank you, I've been waiting for a video and stuff, and it just kind of it blows my mind. And then somewhere in there, I passed 5,000 subscribers, which is just crazy. But I really appreciate it. This just started out as me, drinking a few beers on the weekends and playing around with my servers and kind of, hoping that I didn't forget any of the stuff that I built or created or whatever, and writing down all those steps. But I think it's awesome that you guys enjoy this content, and hopefully you're learning a thing or two from me, and and then carrying it on into your own works. But it's just been awesome, and I really enjoy all the support and feedback that you guys have been giving me, and I just want to thank you for that. So how is this video going to differ from the previous video? Well, so it turns out that after I released the last video, that Dell went ahead and updated the SUU packages along with the SLI image, the support live image, and they actually removed all support for, I believe it was the 11th generation servers, but you won't find the R610 firmwares available on the SUU packages anymore. They had to phase it out, so that they phased out basically all of the legacy stuff, so that way they can make room for the new hardware, the new servers, the new firmwares, and all that kind of stuff, which it makes sense, if you think about it. Unfortunately, the downside to that is that it made it that much more difficult to get these things up to date for the the new server you may have just acquired. I find a lot of people are buying these off eBay, which is exactly what I just did here. I picked up both of these off eBay for about $300 a piece, and they've got dual 6-core Xeons in them, 48 gigabytes of RAM. They'll take 6 2.5-inch drives. There's a PERC 6i in there. 4 gigabit NICs, a dedicated DRAC, and they're just little virtualization powerhouses basically, and they're perfect for experimentation and lab kind of stuff, and whatever. But you definitely want to make sure that they're up to date before you put them in. Fortunately though, Dell still has all of the most current firmwares available in their support section of their website for each individual chassis, along with the newest version of the SLI or support live image. And so that's what I'm going to cover today, is how to download and look for those individual firmware files, along with creating a bootable USB drive from the SLI image, and all the instructions and everything you'll need to get the image booted up and all the firmwares installed. And you'll basically be up to the point where you can go ahead and have a fully updated chassis and be ready to deploy your operating system. Alright, so just jumping right into things, the first thing you're going to want to do is pull up the support page for the PowerEdge R610, and you'll see that it has all of the downloads available for that particular chassis. But the first thing you want to do is get the Dell support live image, and you'll see that it's a CentOS 7 image. So any of the firmwares you download that you want to apply to the server, you're going to want to make sure that they're actually compatible with CentOS 7. So in this case, I'm going to switch the operating system to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, which is compatible with CentOS 7. And then from there, you just want to download any packages that you want to apply to the server. So we're talking things like the BIOS, the lifecycle controller, which isn't as important anymore since they kind of cut all that. But the network, the RAID controller, those kind of things, the DRAC. So I did run into issues with the SAS, the RAID controller, the PERC 6i firmware update on the Linux image. I could not actually verify that it worked on the Linux image, but I was able to apply it. I ended up installing a 2008 R2 trial on the chassis, and I was able to flash the Windows version of the PERC 6i update that way. But I could not get the Linux image to work. It would just basically fail on checking inventory. So basically just download that the SLI image, and then any of the firmwares that you want to apply to the server, and then we're going to create 2 USB drives from those images. So I've actually gone ahead and downloaded the SLI image ahead of time. So I'm just going to pull up Rufus, which is my favorite bootable USB tool, and I'm just going to select my SLI ISO image, and I've already got my 8 gig thumb drive selected, and I'm just going to set it to MBR, BIOS or UEFI, and I'm going to write it in the ISO image mode, and that's it. So Rufus will go ahead and take that ISO image and create a bootable USB drive from that. So I'll be able to take it out of this computer, stick it into my R610 server, and it'll boot into the Dell Linux environment where I can apply my firmware images. Now, I'm not going to show this here, but in the background, I actually took all the firmware files, the .bin files, and I copy and pasted them to a second USB drive. I didn't do anything special. It was just another USB drive. In my case, it was a big drive, so it was like 64 gigs. So I had to do it in the exFAT file system format. So I ran into some issues whenever I got that booted up into the CentOS image, but I'll touch that later. But if you're using a smaller drive that's just normal FAT32, you won't run into any issues. But basically copy all those .bin files to a second USB drive, and then once the server's booted up off of the image that we just created with Rufus from the SLI image, we'll plug in the second drive, and then we'll be able to load the firmwares from that. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit to wherever both USB drives are written, and we got the servers booting up, and we'll go from there. Alright, so just bear with me while I get logged into the DRAC here, but I've got the first USB drive plugged into the server, but not the second one yet. So the first USB drive is going to be the one that I created from the SLI ISO image. And that's it. So the server's not even powered on it or anything at this point. I'm just logging into the DRAC, and then we're actually going to power it on from here. So it should just be 1 second. Alright, so right about here is where I'm going to need to hit F11 to enter the BIOS boot manager. That way I can make sure that I boot off the USB drive that I just inserted in the front of the chassis. And that should be it. So basically it'll boot into the Linux environment, and then we'll pick up from there. And so it's not exactly intuitive, but the USB drives actually show up under the hard drives option under the boot manager. But you see, once you select hard drive, you'll see the additional USB drives located there. So just select whatever drive you put the image on, and then hit enter from there, and it'll go ahead and boot up into the CentOS image. Alright, so now that the environment is basically booted up at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Firefox web browser, and then I'm going to pull up a terminal window, because those are the two tools that I'll need to do everything I'm going to do. Now, these next few steps you may not have to do if the second drive that you use is just a normal small thumb drive, but the one I use is a little bit bigger. It's a 64 gig. So whenever I had that on my Windows machine, I had to format that as exFAT, which turns out is not compatible with CentOS 7 right out the box. So in this case, I'm going to have to install a few packages to get things up to date and compatible with the exFAT thumb drive that I used. So I'll put links to all that stuff down below, and I'll show you the commands that I'm going to use here. But luckily, somebody else blogged about this already, which saved me a bunch of time, and I love that people do that, because that's exactly what I do. And it saved, like I said, it saved me a bunch of time in this situation, and it really helped me out. But I'll put links to all that stuff down below, and then I'll show you here the commands that I'm going to use. You may notice all the mouse lag, and that's because the way the server's hooked up, it's actually jumping through an extra hoop there, and that's what introduces the lag. And it's just because it's not in its normal place. Whenever it's in the normal place, it'll be a lot faster. But you may notice that in the video here that the mouse kind of takes a second to catch up. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this first yum install command, and that's going to deploy the first package. Now, you may run into some issues here where it says yum is already in use, and that's because sometimes the image will come up and try an auto update right off the bat, and you'll have to give it a second for that to chill out. But basically, if you run the command, it should kind of just sit there and wait for that to finish, and then it'll end up running once that's done. So if you run into that issue, just give it a second and it should be okay. But I'm going to go ahead and just sudo yum install this first command, and then after that we'll yum install the exFAT utils in the fuse exFAT, and then we should have all the dependencies we need to be able to run the exFAT formatted USB drive and pull our binary firmwares down from. Alright, so now that we've got the exFAT support installed on the CentOS operating system, we can go ahead and I'm going to plug in the second USB drive that has all the firmwares on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug that in right now, and then give it a second to catch up there. And I'm going to pull up the file manager real quick, just in case, because if you plug the drive in, you may not know where it's going to end up, but we can see it right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and then you see that there's all the firmware files that I've loaded on there. I actually also had the SUU on there too. But if you right click on any one of these and you check out the properties, you'll be able to see the path to the binary files, and it should help you whenever you're at the command line trying to navigate to the directory. But we can see in this case that it's actually /run/media/SLI user/64 gig, which is the thumb drive, and then the R610 folder. So I'll just go ahead and CD to that path, and then we'll be able to run the binaries directly. Alright, so now that we're in the directory, I'm just going to do a quick ls just to show what files are in that directory, and you can see all the firmware binary files that I downloaded from the Dell support website. Now, these can basically be applied in any order that you want, but you're just going to do a sudo and then a // and whatever the file is .bin. So in this case, I'll do the bios.bin right off the bat. And you'll see that it should show a kind of like a splash page with like some information about the update, the version, and all that, what it applies to, and then you can just queue out of that, and then it would go ahead and apply the update as normal. But in this case, I've already applied this update, so it's not going to do that right now. But that's it. So you would just go ahead and run each individual update. One thing to watch out for is some of these are going to force reboots, like the BIOS one would force a reboot. So if the server reboots, this is a live operating system, and you'll have to make sure that you reapply those exFAT updates, otherwise you won't be able to reach the thumb drive after the reboot. So, but other than that, that's pretty much it. So just go ahead and sudo // all the updates that you need, and you should be good to go. Like I said, I ran into an issue with the PERK6i RAID controller one. I actually ended up having to put Windows 2008 R2 and use the Windows version of the firmware update, so it was a .exe, and I was able to successfully flash the PERK6i that way, and I could not do it from the Linux one. It just kept failing to check the inventory or whatever, and it seems to be a common problem with that package. But that's pretty much it. And so I think that's where I'm going to wrap this one. Yet another video on updating the firmwares on the PowerEdge R610 servers, and keeping these bad boys alive and going and up to date. But I hope you guys liked the video, and like I said, I appreciate all the new subscribers and comments, and thank you guys just for everything. It's been awesome. I really appreciate being a part of the YouTube community. But as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.